Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging headfirst into the thought of Arthur Schopenhauer.
Right. The 19th century German philosopher.
Yeah, and let's be honest, he wasn't exactly known for, well, a sunny disposition.
Huh. No, definitely not. But his ideas, about this desire-driven world and asceticism as a path, they've had a huge impact.
Exactly. And that's what we're here to unpack.
So for this exploration, we've got quite a bit of material. Schopenhauer's own writings, obviously.
The world is will and representation. The big one.
The big one, yeah. Plus things like On the Basis of Morality, Parerga, and Paralipomena. And we're also looking at analyses by people who've really grappled with them, like Safransky, Brian McGee.
Right. So our goal really is to kind of distill the essence of his philosophy. We want to hit the key concepts. The will, the world as representation.
His pessimism, which is famous, of course. Morality, the intellect.
Basically give listeners a solid handle on, a really original, if complex, thinker.
And I think to really get Schopenhauer, you have to understand what he was pushing against.
Ah, yeah. The whole German idealism thing.
Exactly. Kant started it. Hegel took it to its peak. Yeah. These huge, elaborate systems.
Very intricate stuff, trying to square philosophy with religion, politics.
And Schopenhauer just wasn't buying it.
No, he famously called Hegel a merchant of wind, right?
He did. Basically thought the complex language masked, emptiness. And he wasn't fond of Schelling or Fichte either.
So who did he admire then?
His heroes were Plato and Kant. Those were his masters. But what makes him really stand out, I think...
the Eastern philosophy connection.
Yes. He was the first major Western philosopher to seriously engage with Eastern thought. The Upanishads, Buddhism, meditation even.
That's such a fascinating mix, isn't it? Plato, Kant, and then Vedic wisdom.
It really is. And it had ripple effects, influenced Emerson in the U.S.
And Nietzsche, Freud later on. You can see the threads.
Absolutely. He saw profound insights in those Eastern texts that just clicked with his own thinking. So, okay, let's get into the world as will and representation. The main argument here is, it's pretty radical.
Lay it on us. What's the absolute core idea?
He says, everything that exists for thought is object only in relation to the subject, representation.
Okay, break that down a bit.
In simpler terms, everything we experience, the world, people, even our idea of ourselves, it's all our mental representation of it. It exists for us, the observer.
So, the tree I see outside isn't the real tree.
It's your mind's interpretation, your representation. Based on sensory input, yes, but constructed by your mind. It's not a direct window onto objective reality.
Okay. So our experience is filtered, subjective. That sounds a lot like it's setting the stage for Nietzsche's perspectivism later on.
Precisely. It's a direct line. And this idea of representation, it ties right into his pessimism.
Ah, the famous pessimism. He had that quote, didn't he? I do not know what eternal life is, but this present life is a bad joke.
That's the one. Pretty bleak. For him, existence is fundamentally about dissatisfaction, a kind of inherent suffering built into the system.
Wow. So is he just the ultimate philosophical downer? Is that the whole story?
Well, it's more nuanced. That pessimism is there, absolutely. But his concept of the will adds another layer. It's not just about feeling bad.
Okay, so what is the will then?
He saw it as this fundamental, unconscious driving force behind everything. He even connected it to Kant's thing in itself, that reality beyond our senses.
So Kant's unknowable reality. Schopenhauer says it's actually this striving force, this will.
Exactly. It's not passive, it's active.
Yeah.
A constant blind striving. And it's not just human.
Not just our desires, it's in nature too.
In everything. A plant reaching for sun, your heart beating. That's the will. He even defined matter as the visibility of the will in general.
Matter is the will made visible. That's a powerful idea. Almost like Heidegger's being in the world.
There's definitely a resonance there, that fundamental embeddedness. Now, Nietzsche also talked about the will.
Right, but differently. More like human drives, will to power.
Yeah, Nietzsche focused more on human psychology, will to live, sexual impulse. Schopenhauer's concept is bigger, more metaphysical. But you see the influence. And Freud, too, grappling with these unconscious drives.
Like they're all wrestling with what's really driving us, beneath the surface. So where does humanity fit into Schopenhauer's picture? He wasn't exactly flattering us, was he?
No. Safransky sums it up nicely. Humanity faces three big affronts. First, cosmological.
Meaning?
We're on this tiny planet, one of countless spheres, just a mold of living beings in a vast and different universe, puts us in our place.
Definitely humbling. Okay, what's the second affront?
Biological. We're basically animals. Our intelligence, just a compensation because we lack strong instincts, we're poorly adapted.
So our big brains are just a patch for our weaknesses. Ouch. And the third?
Philosophical. Our conscious I, our sense of self, it's not really in charge.
Not the master of his own house.
Exactly. We're driven by the will, and our conscious thoughts are often just justifications made after the fact. A bit Freudian, again.
Yeah, that feeling that we're not really in control. So given this rather stark view, what's the philosopher supposed to do?
Confront it. Relentlessly. Like Oedipus, pursuing the truth no matter how horrifying.
So intellectual courage is key. Don't shy away from the tough answers.
Right. Unlike Jocasta, who preferred comforting illusions, for Schopenhauer, honesty was everything. Which brings us back to, the world is my representation.
And only humans can grasp that consciously, right? That's the birth of philosophy.
Exactly. When we realize we don't see the sun itself, just our eyes' representation of it, and that it exists in relation to us, that's the philosophical shift, realizing the subjective bubble we live in.
A huge shift in perspective. Now, you mentioned religion earlier. He had some pretty strong views there, too.
Oh, definitely. Not positive, mostly. He thought religions hide their allegorical nature, leading to continuous fraud.
Oh, so?
They present doctrines as literally true, even absurd ones, though he did admit humanity kind of needs some absurdities, some illusion.
So religions are useful fictions for the masses.
That was his take. He even argued that when the church says reason can't judge dogma, it's basically admitting the dogma is allegorical. The absurd parts are like signposts. Don't take this literally.
Interesting. So the weird bits are the clues.
Yeah.
He saw a Christian allegory evolving, right? With Augustine playing a key role.
Yes. Seeing Augustine as completing its interpretation, linking it to deeper truths. But overall, yeah, a dim view of how religions present themselves.
Especially critical of Christianity compared to Eastern thought.
Very much so. That famous line, Christianity taught what all Asia knew much earlier and even better.
Ouch. He really saw a deep connection between his own ideas and the Upanishads, didn't he?
Absolutely. He stressed Kant for understanding him, but said knowing Plato and the Vedas, the Upanishads, was a huge advantage for readers.
He thought access to the Upanishads was one of the greatest gifts of his era.
Yes, predicting Sanskrit literature would have an impact as big as the rediscovery of Greek texts during the Renaissance. He felt deeply aligned with that ancient Indian wisdom.
It sounds as he was confident his own work would find its audience eventually, even if it took time.
He seemed to expect resistance. He wrote that important truths are often condemned first, maybe seen as trivial later, with only a brief moment of acceptance in between.
A philosophical outlook on fame, perhaps. Let's shift gears a bit. Music. He held music in incredibly high regard.
Uniquely high. He saw it as totally distinct from other arts.
Why? What was special about music?
Because it doesn't just represent the world's appearances, the shadows. It speaks directly to the essence of the world, the will itself.
So painting or sculpture show us representations, but music is a representation of the underlying will.
Exactly. It's a universal language, understood intuitively, bypassing intellect. It taps right into that fundamental striving.
That's a profound idea. And he distinguished between different ways of knowing, right? Rational versus genius.
Yes. The rational method logic, reason that's for practical life, for science, essential but limited.
And the method of genius.
That's for art. It involves an intuitive leap, disregarding the rules of reason, seeing beyond the surface.
So science needs logic, art needs intuition. What about something like modesty? He had a pretty cynical take on that.
He did, often just hypocritical humility, he thought. A way to deflect envy for one's own excellence. If you have no merit and don't claim any, that's just honesty, not modesty.
Ouch. Sharp words. Suggests outward humility can be fake. And this idea of genius seeing differently ties into his view of composers.
Definitely. The composer reveals the world's innermost nature, expressing wisdom their own rational mind might not even grasp. Like a sleepwalker revealing secrets.
So the composer is like a channel for the will's expression through music.
That's the core idea, tapping into something fundamental. But even with these insights, Schopenhauer knew there were limits to our knowledge.
Right. Our world, the knowable world within us, is both our subject matter and our ultimate boundary. We can't step outside our own representation.
Exactly. And within that world, he saw life as quite repetitive.
The same melody playing over and over with slight variations. Sounds a bit dreary.
It fits his pessimism, the fundamental sameness under the surface of different lives. Now, what about reason itself? He had a specific characterization.
Ah, the feminine analogy. Reason can only give after receiving. has no content of its own, just empty forms.
A controversial analogy today for sure. His point was reason processes, it doesn't originate like genius intuition does.
Which connects to his distinction between talent and genius.
The famous one. Talent hits a target others cannot reach. Genius hits a target others cannot see.
Fantastic quote. Captures that visionary aspect perfectly. Talent improves, genius creates anew, and bringing it back to the self.
My body and my will are one.
What's the deeper meaning there?
It's that the body isn't just a container for the will. It is the will made manifest. Our physical being is the will expressing itself in the world. It's integrated.
Makes sense. Given his view of life, how did he see tragedy in art?
As profoundly true. Tragedy shows the noblest people, after struggle, renouncing life's pleasures, sometimes life itself. He saw deep meaning in that surrender.
Acknowledging the futility of the will's striving, perhaps. Now, he also talked about an innate error we all have.
Yes, the belief that we exist to be happy.
And since the world isn't set up for our constant happiness.
Do we feel life is full of contradictions, disappointments? It stems from that basic, mistaken assumption.
Ties right back to the pessimism. And his summary of life's balance sheet.
Life is a business that doesn't cover the costs.
Blunt.
No.
Sugarcoating there. We touched on religion, but he critiqued specific texts too, like the Quran.
Yes, he was quite dismissive, found no real intellectual value there despite its historical impact. Saw it as simplistic theism, powerful, yes, but philosophically lacking for him.
And on morality, he felt religions focused on the wrong thing.
They promised rewards for the will, the heart, good intentions, character, but not for the intellect, for understanding. He saw that as a flaw.
Prioritizing faith over insight. Switching gears again, that lovely quote about children and genius.
Every child is, in a certain sense, a genius, and every genius is, in a certain sense, a child.
It captures that shared quality of uninhibited creativity, fresh perspective.
Exactly, that wonder, that ability to see things anew, beautifully put. And despite all the abstract thought, he saw value in physical labor too. He did. A satisfaction in physical work, even framing repetitive labor as buying dear the satisfaction of breathing, a basic embodied grounding.
A reminder of simple satisfactions even in a difficult existence. Now, given the world as representation, ultimately he saw it all as insubstantial.
Yes. This our world, with all its suns and Milky Ways, is nothing. Underscores it's all a construct of our perception.
Mind-bending. Hard to square our vivid reality with the idea it's nothing. And that Borges quote about the cat.
Yeah, the cat in the yard now is the same cat from centuries ago. Illustrates a kind of timeless essence, the underlying being persisting through individual forms. Poetic.
Very. Okay, let's dig into morality. Compassion was key for him, wasn't it?
Absolutely foundational. He slammed traditional morals, Christian and philosophical, for excluding animals, treating them like objects.
He was a strong advocate for animal welfare.
Outraged by the idea they have no rights, he blamed Judeo-Christian tradition and Descartes for what he called the barbarity of the West towards animals.
Strong words. So how does compassion form the basis of morality?
Boundless compassion for all living beings is the guarantee of moral conduct. If you truly feel that connection, you won't harm others. He loved the Indian prayer, may all living beings be delivered from pain.
So compassion isn't just a feeling, it is ethics in action. And this connects to pantheism, the unity of all things.
Yes. He believed the apparent separateness of beings is an illusion. Underlying it all is one single entity, identical in everything. He found this in the Vedas, the Upanishads.
So compassion arises when we recognize that underlying unity, see ourselves in others.
That's the idea. Recognizing the ego and non-ego aren't truly separate. That's the metaphysical basis of ethics for him.
Powerful. What about the state? What was its role?
Purely protective. Protect individuals from each other and protect the whole from outside enemies. That's it.
Nothing more. No moral education.
He was very wary of that. Saw it as suppressing liberty, like a Chinese making of state and religion. A limited, almost libertarian view.
Okay. And philosophy itself, its relation to truth.
Philosophy is science without faith. It relies only on empirical evidence or proven demonstration. A true philosopher must love truth unconditionally, above everything, authority, dogma, popular opinion.
Fierce intellectual integrity, but he was critical of university philosophy.
Deeply skeptical. Governments pay professors, right? They won't pay them to contradict the official religious line. He called religion the metaphysics of the people.
So he thought university philosophy was compromised. Truth takes a backseat.
Pretty much. often just dressing up religious dogma in fancy language, serving the status quo, providing careers, not a genuine search for truth, in his view.
He contrasted that with the real philosopher's earnest quest and wary of religious philosophy.
Yes, saw it as starting with answers instead of questions, like talking about Christian arithmetic, a category mistake. Philosophy must be free.
A truly independent mind. Let's touch on some other direct opinions. National pride.
The cheapest form of pride means you lack individual qualities to be proud of, so you latch onto the nation. Ouch.
Valuing the individual over the collective again. And Philistine. What did that mean to him?
Someone without intellectual needs, so without intellectual pleasures. Easily bored, seeking external distractions due to inner emptiness, concerned only with the physical.
A dull, superficial existence, lacking inner life. And the motivation for genius. Not money or fame.
Talent might work for those. But genius, it's harder to pin down. Not money, they rarely get rich. Not fame, often uncertain, maybe posthumous. It's more an inner compulsion, he thought.
Like a tree bearing fruit, an inner necessity. Now, summing up his overall view of existence.
It led him to say that our existence is something that would have been better not to have been. Core pessimism.
Bleak. And even reading. He saw it as potentially problematic.
Yeah, a substitute for thinking for yourself. Letting someone else direct your thoughts. He valued independent thought above all.
Reading should supplement, not replace, thinking. And hate versus disdain.
Hatred is from the heart, emotional. Contempt or disdain is from the head, an intellectual judgment. Mutually exclusive, he thought.
Interesting distinction. Given the clue, what about death?
That poetic line, every parting gives a foretaste of death, every reunion a hint of the resurrection. Hints at cycles, continuity, perhaps.
A surprisingly gentle note. Now, we have to mention his views on men and women.
Yes, definitely products of his time and problematic. Men are by nature indifferent. Women are by nature enemies, and harsh critiques of female intellect and aesthetics.
Views widely rejected today, of course. Important to acknowledge those aspects are not reflective of modern understanding, even within an influential philosophy. He also hated noise.
Oh, yes, the most impertinent of all forms of interruption. An assault on thought makes sense, given how much he valued contemplation.
Need quiet for intellectual work. And finally, monotheism.
He observed only monotheistic faiths seem to have religious wars, persecutions, iconoclasm, blamed the jealous God concept, a critical historical perspective.
Well, this has certainly been a deep dive. Schopenhauer. Complex, challenging, definitely unforgettable.
Absolutely. Not afraid to question everything, offering a stark, often uncomfortable view.
But as he said, naked truth is most beautiful. His relentless honesty, even in pessimism, still resonates. And that Einstein quote about him.
Man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. A profound insight into our limited agency. Borges, Jung, many others felt his impact.
It's striking how these 19th century ideas still push us to examine our own lives, our desires, the nature of suffering.
Exactly. His focus on the will and suffering, it really makes you think.
Which leads to a final thought for our listeners. Given Schopenhauer's ideas about the driving will and the reality of suffering, how might that understanding influence your own ethics, your choices, especially facing global challenges like climate change or scarcity? Does his philosophy offer resilience or maybe a call to reevaluate what we truly desire from life?
Definitely food for thought. A lot to chew on there.
It certainly is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Guys, see you in another podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel.